In a quiet village where secrets cling tighter than shadows, one wrong whisper becomes the spark that sets a deadly night in motion. Tonight, every clue hides a betrayal, and every heartbeat counts. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? And subscribe so you never miss upcoming mysteries. Nero Wolfe and the case of the man who wanted him dead. The sun wasn't up yet, but the brownstone was already working on my nerves when I opened the front door and saw the envelope lying on the mat like a ransom note that had overslept its own deadline. 7 a.m. is too early for melodrama, especially the pasted letter kind. But there it was. Mr. Nero Wolfe, spelled out with enough headlines to paper a small tabloid. If someone wanted to kill my employer, they were starting by assaulting my eyesight. I bent down, picked it up, and gave it the old Archie Goodwin eyebrow. No return address, no smudges, just the faint chemical tang of bad decisions. A promising start. Inside, the office was dim, curtains half drawn, morning sneaking around like it didn't want to bother Wolfe before breakfast. Fritz was down in the kitchen practicing some symphonic egg maneuver. The aroma floated up the stairway like a polite reminder that the world wasn't entirely made of trouble. Wolfe, however, was still in his room, probably rehearsing the indignation he'd unleash if I dared to rouse him ahead of schedule. Normally I'd wait, but a threat addressed in cut-out newspaper letters deserves prompt attention, even in our line of work. I closed the door, braced myself, and opened the envelope. The note wasn't long. It never is when someone wants to kill you. Within 48 hours, it read, Nero Wolfe will be dead. Below that, a Polaroid of a man in a slouch hat, the brim torn, standing across the street with the brownstone circled in red pencil behind him. If this was intended to inspire terror, it had misfired. It only inspired irritation. The handwriting, or cutting and pasting rather, had all the flair of a drunk newsroom intern. I went upstairs. Waking Wolfe early is a delicate matter. You don't pound, you don't shout, and you don't make conversational overtures through the door. You knock once, clearly, in a tone that suggests divine necessity. Yes, came the voice, thick from sleep but edged with authority. It's me. Something at the door I think you'll want to see. I doubt it, he growled. Nevertheless, come. He was sitting up in bed, draped in a yellow robe large enough to tent a circus. I handed him the envelope. Wolfe stared at the letters like they had personally offended him, which, knowing Wolfe, they had. He examined the Polaroid longer than he needed to. Assassination threats, he said, should show more originality, Archie. This is pedestrian. Pedestrian or not, someone took a picture of the house and circled it, which is the modern equivalent of knocking loudly and running away. And they want you dead within 48 hours. We could at least pretend to care. He gave me a glower, usually reserved for inferior Shad Row. Pfui, call Saul Panzer. Have him come at once. You want him now? Fritz is still working on breakfast. Yes, I prefer my eggs unspoiled by homicide. That was Wolfe for you. Culinary priorities above mortal peril. I dialed Saul and explained the situation. Saul, being Saul, simply said, on my way, and hung up. If the world ever fell apart, I'd want Saul in charge of the glue. By the time Wolfe descended to the office, treading softly, the room had more light, but not more cheer. He sat behind his desk and placed the Polaroid on a blotter like it was a rare stamp. The background, he murmured, shows a glass plate camera in the shop window across from our street. Those are no longer common. Few would recognize it. Meaning we're dealing with someone who knows cameras, or someone who wants us to think he does. He flicked me a sideways glance. You are imprecise. I'm awake. That's precise enough. We didn't get far into hypothesizing because the doorbell rang at 7:52 a.m. and Fritz appeared in the office doorway, not entering. Fritz never entered without invitation. Herr Goodwin, Inspector Kramer is here. Just what the morning needed. A storm cloud with a badge. Kramer entered not with his customary volcanic energy, but something quieter, heavier. He held an envelope of his own. Good morning, Wolfe. Goodwin. His cigar wasn't lit, another sign we were dealing with weightier business than usual. I got a note too. Same cutout style, same folderol. Only mine says, stay out of Wolfe's case if you value your badge. Someone values my life, Wolfe muttered. How touching. Kramer gave a grunt that translated to, don't start. He looked at the Polaroid on Wolfe's desk. You got one too, huh? Mine didn't come with a picture. Yours implies involvement, Wolfe said. Mine implies doom. We mustn't confuse the two. Kramer ignored that and took a slow walk around the office, studying angles. Any idea who would pull a stunt like this? Half of Manhattan, I offered. But this one uses arts and crafts supplies. Kramer pressed a thumb to his temple. Goodwin, don't clown. Not today. Then take it up with the killer. He started it. Wolfe cleared his throat, a sound with the resonance of a judge's gavel. Inspector, your presence here suggests you believe the threat credible. I believe someone wants something, Kramer said, and they're willing to spook the pair of you to get it. And I don't like the timing. A man named Foreign from the old Photography League filed a complaint yesterday, said someone was tailing him. Now Wolfe gets fan mail and I get warned off. The Photography League, Wolfe repeated. That was Wolfe's version of raising an eyebrow. The Photography League had been a big deal 15 years ago, a circle of ambitious camera enthusiasts who treated developing chemicals like holy oil and declared themselves priests of truth. Rivalries, jealousies, sabotage, the whole creative stew. Kramer handed me his envelope. Compare it to yours. Same paper, same adhesive, probably same scissors. I held them side by side. He was right. The edges had identical tearing patterns. Someone had done bulk cutting, then sorted the letters afterward. Amateurs digitize, professionals prepare. You said Foreign filed a complaint, I said. Any others? No, but the guy was rattled, didn't want police protection, just wanted us to know, whatever that means. Artists, I said. They like to inspire without clarifying. Kramer shot me a look that could dull razor blades. Wolfe leaned back, belly anchored like a monument. Inspector, may we assume you will not honor the anonymous warning? You may assume I'll do my job, Kramer said, and that includes making sure nobody kills you, much as it pains me to devote manpower for such a specialized citizen. That was almost a compliment, Kramer style. Wolfe inclined his head by a millimeter, which for him was a bow. Saul arrived at 8:15. He knocked once, entered silently, nodded to Kramer, and took up a position near Wolfe's desk without waiting for instructions. Wolfe slid him the Polaroid. Saul studied it like it was a chess problem. Hat's cheap, camera's rare. Angle suggests the photographer was standing on the curb, not across the street. Whoever took this wanted the window and the brownstone in the same frame. Intentional. The killer wants credit, I said, or wants us to think he's clever. Maybe he is, Saul said mildly. Kramer stepped forward. Panzer, you see anything else? Saul pointed at a faint shadow near the window reflection. A handprint on the glass. Probably the photographer steadied himself. If the shopkeeper cleaned it afterward, we're out of luck. If not, Goodwin and I can check. Wolfe lifted a hand, palm outward. Not yet. Archie will not go gallivanting on guesses. We need facts. You mean Archie needs breakfast, I said. Wolfe didn't deny it, which meant he agreed but refused to concede the point. Fritz appeared again. Breakfast is served. Kramer snorted. I swear, Wolfe, if someone shot at you during breakfast, you'd ask them to wait until after eggs. Not eggs, Wolfe corrected. Today is trout. That was the closest thing we had to normalcy. Kramer took his envelope back. Saul pocketed nothing. Saul never pockets evidence. And Wolfe rose, using the desk edge for leverage. Inspector, I will consider this matter after sustenance. Kramer gave him a long, resigned look. Fine, but Wolfe, don't underestimate threats. They escalate. Wolfe brushed invisible lint from his sleeve, as do police budgets. Kramer left with a muttered, All right, Wolfe, I'll wait for your report. A respectful exit, the rarest of commodities. Saul waited until he was gone. You want me to start checking the shops? After breakfast, Wolfe decreed. We moved to the dining room. I lagged a step behind and pocketed a mental note about the glass plate camera in the Polaroid. Rare, expensive, beloved by purists. Whoever chose that angle wasn't just documenting the brownstone. They were sending a signature. Wolfe was quiet during breakfast, which meant he was thinking hard. When Wolfe thinks hard, the world is supposed to stop making noise so the universe can hear him better. I violated the rule. You know, I said, the killer may be sloppy, but he's thorough. He even included arts and crafts. Wolfe gave a slow blink. Archie, if you continue, I shall return upstairs and leave the murder to your discretion. Then I'll shut up, I said, because your discretion pays better. He grunted, a soft one, but affectionate in Wolfe terms. When breakfast ended, Wolfe returned to the office. I followed, unsure whether he'd summon orchids or suspects. He sat, rang the bell cord, and waited for Fritz to clear the dishes. Then he picked up the Polaroid again. "Archie, we begin. Make notes. This photographer, whoever he is, wishes to be acknowledged. We shall oblige." "Carefully," I said. "He wants you dead." Wolfe looked up, eyes steady. "Yes, and you must take greater care." That from him was a curtain of armour. I took my seat, opened a notebook, and the day officially began. By late morning, the brownstone had settled into the kind of hush that usually means Wolfe is either thinking or digesting, and since it was still shy of 1 o'clock, he was thinking. I was at my desk, pretending to type a report, but actually admiring the last breakfast roll Fritz had made, which I had liberated while Wolfe was in one of his contemplative trances. The office felt like a museum before visiting hours, quiet, dignified, and faintly judgmental. That was when the doorbell rang with the shy, apologetic tone of someone who has no idea what a Wolfe encounter does to a person's blood pressure. I opened the door expecting a salesman, a reporter, or possibly someone from the photography league wanting to discuss morale. Instead, a woman stood there looking like she'd just seen the ghost of a ghost, pale, trembling, clutching a handbag to her ribs, as though she were trying to keep her heart from falling out. She wore a tailored navy suit with the hemline shaking as much as her hands. Her eyes flicked over me fast, fearful, calculating, exhausted. "Mr. Goodwin?" Her voice had the brittle edge of someone down to their very last nerve. "The one and only. You're safe enough here unless you insult Fritz's soufflé. Come in." She stepped inside with the tentative precision of someone entering a lion's den with raw meat in her pocket. When she reached the office doorway and saw Wolfe, she stopped like she'd hit an invisible wall. I couldn't blame her. Wolfe, seated in his oversized chair, expression neutral, fingers steepled, looks less like a detective and more like the magistrate heaven assigns to sinners they're not sure about. "Your name?" Wolfe asked, not unkindly, but with enough gravity to make her flinch. Ellen Vardis." She clasped the handbag harder. "I wrote your office last year, but my husband was ill then. He's gone now." She didn't cry, which was impressive considering how close she was to the edge. "Mrs. Vardis," Wolfe said, "state your purpose." She drew a long, trembling breath. "My husband was a photographer, a pioneering one. He belonged to the old Manhattan Guild of Photographers." Wolfe nodded once. "I recall the guild. They disbanded in quarrels." "Quarrels?" She let out a small, strained laugh. "They practically tried to strangle each other with their own tripod straps. Rivalries, disputes, secrets. My husband, he kept records, not of the quarrels, but of the photographs, of what he captured, of who he captured." She opened the handbag and produced a small leather ledger torn along the spine. I stepped forward politely, took it, and flipped it open. The pages were filled with coded entries, negative numbers, dates, initials, meeting places, and the occasional cryptic symbol. I've seen crossword puzzles that made more immediate sense. "Your husband," Wolfe said, "was archiving." "Yes, for a book he wanted to publish someday. But someone broke into my home last night. They tore apart his darkroom. They knew exactly where to search. And they took something, a section of his archive, something important. And this," Wolfe gestured to the ledger, "is what remains." Yes. Her hands wrung themselves like they wanted separate vacations. "And I believe the same man who broke into the darkroom is the one threatening you, Mr. Wolfe." "Well," I said, "that's efficient. Why limit himself to one hobby of attempted murder when he can double up?" Wolfe shot me a look meant to discourage further stand-up comedy. Ellen Vardis's gaze darted between us, as if trying to determine whether we were allies or additional threats. "I have reason to think," she went on, "that whoever ransacked my home is the same man who killed my husband." I stopped flipping the ledger. "Killed? I thought—" "He died suddenly," she whispered. "But there were circumstances, people who wanted him silenced. He took photographs of powerful individuals, politicians, society patrons, businessmen, not scandalous, not intentionally, but candid, unscripted, sometimes too honest." Wolfe let out a low hum. "Truth is often the greater scandal." She nodded rapidly. Yes, and whoever wants your life, Mr. Wolfe, wants his work erased too. My husband warned me before he died that if anything happened, I was to come here. To you. He said you were the only man in New York harder to intimidate than he was. That earned her one of Wolfe's eyebrows, a rare gift. Mrs. Vardis, he said, what do you want? I want protection, she said. I want the truth. I want you to find the man responsible before he kills you, or me, or anyone else. I want you to stop him. Stop him how? I asked. By discovering what he was after, she said, tapping the ledger. These coded entries, my husband said the wrong photograph in the wrong hands could ruin a man, or make him desperate. Wolfe extended his hand toward me. I gave him the ledger. He skimmed, lips tightening a fraction. You have money, Mrs. Vardis? Some. Enough. She swallowed. I'll pay anything. Please. Anything, Wolfe repeated dryly, is a dangerous promise. I mean it, she said. Just help me, please. Wolfe's fingers drummed once on the armrest. If you speak one falsehood, I withdraw, entirely. Her voice cracked. I understand. I caught a faint chemical whiff and noticed something smeared on her glove. You said you haven't entered your husband's darkroom since he died. No, never. I can't bear it. Well, I said, turning her hand gently, these stains on your gloves say otherwise. These are fixer chemicals, Mrs. Vardis, old stock too. She jerked her hand back, horrified. I don't know how. You might want to try again, I said. Truth saves everyone time. But before Wolfe could pursue that, the phone rang. I answered. Nero Wolfe's office. Archie Goodwin speaking, providing charm since dawn. Kramer's voice came across the line like gravel being poured into a tin bucket. Goodwin, put Wolfe on. He's busy warning a client against lying, I said. Call back after he solves human nature. Goodwin, now. I handed Wolfe the receiver. Kramer wasted no time. Wolfe's eyes narrowed as he listened, then he said, Send it by courier, and hung up. What's the latest? I asked. A second message, Wolfe said, addressed to Inspector Kramer. It arrived with a scrap of a photographic negative, charred, my name etched into it. Mrs. Vardis let out a small cry. He's escalating. Well, I said, Kramer always wanted more mail. Wolfe ignored me. Mrs. Vardis, sit. She obeyed, lowering herself into the red chair as though afraid it might swallow her. Wolfe continued. Your husband's ledger includes references to numerous individuals, some of whom possess influence enough to induce burglary, or worse. Why would they now pursue you? Because they think I know where the missing negatives are, she whispered. But I don't. I swear I don't. Phooey, Wolfe muttered. I raised an eyebrow. Either she's a good liar or a terrible one. She is frightened, Wolfe said. Fright clouds accuracy. I'm not lying, she insisted. I'm not. Mrs. Vardis, Wolfe said, the man who threatens me also threatens you. If you want my protection, you must supply clarity. Your husband's enemies were manifold. Out of all of them, which would be most desperate now? She hesitated just a fraction too long. I don't know. Wolfe's expression flattened. Archie, note her hesitation. I opened a fresh page in my notebook, marked and starred. Mrs. Vardis twisted her gloves. The stains smeared darker. I'm not hiding anything. Wolfe made a noise somewhere between a sigh and a warning bell. You are hiding something. Whether it is material, we shall discover. I caught her eyes. Mrs. Vardis, if you want Wolfe to help you, you don't need courage. You need honesty. She blinked rapidly for 10 seconds, then finally said, There was someone, a man who hated my husband, a rival in the guild. He believed my husband had photographs that could destroy him. Name, Wolfe commanded. Charles Foreign. Well, well, I said. The man who filed a complaint yesterday with homicide. He said someone was tailing him. That's him, she said. But he isn't the only one. Who else? Wolfe asked sharply. She faltered, then exhaled. Morris Bly, a dealer in old camera equipment, and Lillian Kerr. She was once my husband's student. I closed the notebook. Congratulations, Mrs. Vardis. You've just nominated half the photography league as suspects. Her lip quivered. Will you take me on as a client? Wolfe took his time. He picked up the ledger, weighed it in his hand, and said, Yes, conditioned on unbroken honesty from this moment forward. She sagged in relief. "Thank you." "You may also thank Mr. Goodwin," Wolfe added. "He is the one who risks his hide." I grinned. "Some of us have hides worth risking." Wolfe shot me a glare, but there was warmth beneath it. Just then, footsteps approached. Fritz appeared at the doorway. "Lunch in 20 minutes. Wolfe nodded. "Mrs. Vardis, we shall resume at 2 o'clock. Archie will arrange safe transport. You will not return home." "But, no," Wolfe said sharply. "You are now a target, Archie." "I'll handle it," I said. As she rose, Wolfe rang the bell cord. "And Archie, when you return, bring me photostats of the ledger pages. You will not take the ledger itself out of this house." "Understood." Mrs. Vardis gave Wolfe a trembling nod, then another to me as I escorted her to the door. When I returned, Wolfe was studying the stained glove she had left behind. "Chemical stains," he murmured. "And she claims she hasn't entered the dark room in years." "Red herring?" I suggested. "Possibly," he exhaled. "But doubt is fertile soil." I sat, cracked my knuckles, and said, "Ready for lunch?" "Archie," Wolfe said, "stop prattling," which, for Wolfe, meant everything was on schedule. If you've never started your morning by diving into Manhattan's darkroom district, imagine walking into a cloud made of vinegar fumes, burnt coffee, jealousy, and enough artistic ego to power a small dictatorship. That's where I headed after lunch, with instructions from Wolfe to acquire information without entangling myself in irrelevancies. Which is Wolfe speak for, don't flirt, don't gamble, don't provoke, and please, for the love of orchids, don't get arrested. I make no promises. The district near Union Square was alive with noise and neon despite the weak daylight. Signs for developing, printing, portraits hung like oversized price tags. Windows displayed everything from camera bodies to avant-garde prints of women posing in ways that suggested they'd misplaced most of their clothes. The air reeked of hypo, ambition, and bankruptcy. My first stop was Charles Foreign's studio, a second-floor affair with velvet curtains and a gold plaque announcing his superiority to lesser mortals. Foreign answered the door himself, wearing a silk robe and the expression of a man who believes mirrors exist for the privilege of reflecting him. "What do you want?" he snapped. "Sunshine, world peace, and a few answers," I said. "But I'll settle for the answers." He stepped aside in a huff. The studio walls were lined with glamorous portraits of socialites posed like they were auditioning for sainthood. "I don't talk to press," he said. "Good news," I said. "I'm not press, I'm Archie Goodwin, working for Nero Wolfe." That got him. His eyebrows went up so high they nearly joined his hairline. "Ah, the fat man sends his assistant?" "The fat man," I said pleasantly, "sends whoever he likes. Today, that's me." He folded his robe and ego around himself. "What do you want to know?" "Ellen Vardis." His face tightened. Not grief. Annoyance. Her husband was a menace. That man took photographs he had no right to take. "Scandalous ones?" he snorted. "Scandalous? Society women showing their ankles are scandalous. No. Vardis photographed truth. Ugly truth. And ugly truth makes enemies." "But you think he was blackmailing people?" "I know he was." He leaned in, breath smelling of mint tea and vanity. 2 years ago, a patron told me Vardis threatened to publish something that would ruin him. He paid Vardis off. "A patron whose name you'll graciously share," he recoiled. "You think I'd betray a client? Absolutely not." "So you'll betray a dead man instead," I said. "Convenient," he frowned. "Don't twist my words." "I'm not twisting," I said, "just braiding." He drifted toward a stack of negatives, rearranging them compulsively. Portraitists like to act calm, but their hands tell the truth. "If Vardis is involved in something now," he said, "I want no part of it. His widow should burn that ledger." That was his big reveal, and it smelled like a red herring that had been left out overnight. "Thanks," I said. "You've been enlightening," he sniffed. "You're wasting your time." "Probably," I said. "But time's cheaper than film these days." I left him grappling with his conscience, or indigestion, and headed down the block toward a narrow door labeled Kerr Experimental Studios. Inside, the scent of developer hit like a punch. Lillian Kerr emerged from behind a curtain, wiping her hands on a cloth that had once been white before it began flirting with every chemical in Manhattan. She was tall, angular, and dressed in black from neck to toe. If she'd smiled, the sun might have risen early, but I didn't see her smile. "You're Wolfe's man," she said without greeting. "I am Wolfe's man," I admitted. "He rents me out at reasonable rates." She didn't return the gag. "What do you want?" "Opinions, from someone who knew Vardis." "Vardis was a genius," she said, moving to a table littered with lenses. "A mad one, but a genius." "And enemies?" She shrugged. "Geniuses attract enemies the way light attracts moths." "Was he blackmailing people?" She shot me a look sharp enough to develop film with. "Absolutely not. He despised the idea. He believed in revelation, not extortion. But belief doesn't protect you from people who'd prefer their sins remain unknown." I leaned on a stool. Did his wife know about his projects? Her eyes flickered. She knew enough to fear them. "Did you see her recently?" Another flicker. "Twice. She asked me to buy old film stock for her." "That's interesting," I said casually, "because she told us she hasn't set foot in a darkroom in years." Lillian wiped her hands again, stalling. "Maybe she wanted to remember her husband. Maybe she wanted to develop something he left behind." "Or maybe," I said, "she wanted to hide something." Her jaw tightened. "Be careful with accusations, Mr. Goodwin." "I'm always careful," I said, "especially with people who work in darkness." She turned away, dismissing me like a bad print. I left. The third stop was Morris Bly's camera supply, a cramped shop stuffed with tripods, bellows, shutter parts, and enough dust to make a mummy feel at home. Bly was behind the counter, sleeves rolled to the elbow, hat pushed back, face creased with the exhaustion of a man who gambles more than he sleeps. "Goodwin," he grumbled, "I heard you were poking around." "You heard right," I said. "I'm looking into Vardis." He stiffened. "I don't talk about the dead." "You talked plenty when he was alive," I said. "You sold him half his equipment." He folded his arms. "He paid me. Cash. Always." "Bly, you know anything about someone threatening Nero Wolfe?" "Only an idiot would," he said, "and most idiots can't aim." I scanned the shelves, and there it was, the rare glass plate camera Wolfe had identified in the Polaroid. "Mind if I take a look at that?" I pointed. Bly hesitated. "It's for sale." "So, was your poker debt last month, I heard." He shot me a sour look. "That camera's not mine. I'm holding it for someone." "Who?" "Private seller." "Name?" "No." I stepped closer. "This camera appears in a photo taken of Wolfe's brownstone. If you're holding it for a friend, your friend may be a murderer." He swallowed hard. "It wasn't him. He just collects. He'd never—" "That camera," I said, "didn't walk here by itself." Bly sagged onto a stool. "Look, Goodwin, I'm telling you the truth. I don't know anything about threats or shooting or whatever you're chasing. My nerves are bad enough as it is." "Your nerves," I said, "aren't my problem." Then something caught my eye, a receipt partly tucked under a stack of invoices. I slid it free. Ellen Vardis. Purchase. Mill-grade unregistered film stock. Date. 2 weeks before her husband's death. So much for her claim of staying out of darkrooms. I pocketed a photostat after returning the original to Bly's counter. "Thanks," I said. "You're a fountain of information." He scowled. "Everything I told you is true." "That," I said, "is the biggest lie you've told today." Back on the street, the afternoon sun was trying to burn through the film of developer fumes without much luck. I found a drugstore, ducked into a phone booth, and dialed home base. Wolfe answered on the second ring, sounding like I'd interrupted him in the middle of proving Euclid wrong. "Report." "I've interviewed the temperamental, the artistic, and the bankrupt," I said. "Foreign claims Vardis was blackmailing people. Kerr says he was a saint. Bly holds the rare camera from the Polaroid and denies everything. Also, Mrs. Vardis bought illegal film 2 weeks before her husband died." A pause. Then, "You are in a location with intolerable noise." "Drugstore? Payphone? It's New York." "I know where we are, Archie," Wolfe growled. "Proceed, but do not, under any circumstances, tangle with Stebbins's bulldozer routine." That was Wolfe's way of saying Stebbins was around, and so he was. The booth door opened and Stebbins himself glowered in. "Goodwin," he said, "move." "Inspector Darling," I said, "I'm on the phone." Kramer appeared behind him. "Goodwin, off." I hung up. "Gentlemen, to what do I owe this pleasure besides my sparkling personality?" Kramer's cigar twitched. "We got another message. The bastard wants Wolfe dead, and we want him first. That makes two of us, I said. Don't get cute, Kramer muttered, but the edge wasn't hostile. You find anything? I handed him the photostat of the film stock receipt. He whistled. She lied. That's useful. Useful, Stebbins grunted. And messy. Kramer folded the photostat. Tell Wolfe we'll share what we get, for once. That was cooperation if I'd ever seen it. As I stepped into the street again, I thought, nothing brings men together like a shared assassin. It was time to head back to Wolfe with the news, unless he got there first, which would be a miracle worthy of canonization. I've walked into the brownstone 1,000 times, but rarely with the sense that the building itself was holding its breath. The late afternoon light slanted through the front hall like a blade, and everything felt sharpened by it. Shadows thinner, floorboards tighter, the whole place waiting for something unpleasant to happen. I'd barely shaken off the developer fumes of Union Square when I stepped into Wolfe's office and found him in his customary throne, dictating a letter to no one in particular, while sipping his pre-dinner beer with the serenity of a man who believed gunfire was something that happened to other people. Archie, he said without looking up, your report is late. I know, I answered, but Union Square was conducting an alchemical experiment with burnt toast and photographic fumes, and I lacked a gas mask. He grunted. Sit. I crossed the office toward my desk, making a mental note to sweep up some of the paper trail I'd left earlier. Wolfe was deep into a tirade about the execrable decline of photographic craftsmanship, when something cracked the air like a vicious punctuation mark. The window behind Wolfe's desk exploded. Glass went flying in a glittering storm. Wolfe froze in mid-sentence, his head turning with slow, monumental precision. I dropped instinctively, mentally cursing every photographer in New York. Fritz shouted from the dining room. Theodore bellowed something entirely unflattering from the plant rooms. I crawled toward Wolfe, checking him over. You all right? Yes, he rumbled, voice low and resonant. The assassin has poor aim. I risked a look at the window. A neat bullet hole marked the center of the remaining pane. Whoever fired had been across the street with a clear shot of Wolfe's head, and they'd missed. Whether that meant incompetence or a warning was a question we'd answer later, preferably when glass wasn't still falling from the frame. Fritz burst into the doorway. Mr. Wolfe! Wolfe waved one hand. I am uninjured, Fritz. Retreat. Fritz obeyed, albeit with the expression of a man prepared to storm the barricades with a ladle. I stood, brushed glass off my trousers and said, Well, that settles it. You definitely owe me hazard pay, or at least a day off. Wolfe gave me a glare capable of melting steel. Do not prattle. Before I could respond, the front door crashed open. Kramer barreled in with Stebbins and a squad of uniforms, all of them wearing expressions carved from granite. Kramer's jaw was clenched so hard the cigar in his mouth looked terrified. Wolfe! Goodwin! Anyone hit? No, I said, although my feelings are bruised. Kramer ignored that, striding straight to the shattered window. Shot came from the rooftop across the street, he muttered. Snipers checking it now. He turned to Wolfe. I told you this was serious. Wolfe sniffed. You told me nothing of consequence, Inspector. Save the attitude, Kramer growled. Someone just tried to blow your head off. And failed, Wolfe said, which speaks poorly of his competence. Stebbins bent to examine a piece of glass. Steel-jacketed round, he grunted. Military surplus. That sent a quiet chill down my spine. Ellen's purchase of military-grade film stock was beginning to feel like more than a coincidence. Surveillance, war gear, rare cameras. Our killer was blending hobbies like a mad chemist. Kramer turned to me. Goodwin, you said earlier someone from the Photography League was being tailed. Think this connects? I think, I said, brushing more glass from my sleeve, that someone's using photographic gear as a theme, a threat, and possibly a signature. And Wolfe here is the prize shot. Wolfe gave a short, displeased hum. Archie, stop sweeping. I'm not sweeping. I'm brushing. Your hands, Wolfe snapped more sharply than usual, are an investigative asset. Do not endanger them with broken glass. It was the closest he'd ever get to shouting affectionately, so I let it slide. Kramer moved around the room examining angles. Whoever fired knew Wolfe's schedule, knew where he sits, knew the window layout. Knew he wouldn't move, I added. Knew you would, Kramer said. His tone was unreadable. Before Wolfe could craft a retort, the doorbell rang. Fritz reappeared, looking startled. "It is Mrs. Vardis, sir." Wolfe frowned. "At this hour? Show her in." Ellen Vardis entered the office looking like she'd sprinted through a hurricane. Her coat was half-buttoned, her gloves mismatched, her eyes wild. "Mr. Wolfe," she gasped. "He followed me." "Who?" I asked. "The man with the hat, the one in the Polaroid." Her voice shook hard enough to rattle the remaining glass in the window. I saw him again." "Where?" Wolfe asked. "Outside my hotel. He was watching the door. I ran out the side entrance. I thought I lost him, but Mr. Goodwin, is that—" Her eyes widened at the shattered window. "Yes," I said. "Somebody tried to turn Wolfe into a skylight." Ellen pressed a hand to her chest. "I was right. He wants me dead too." Kramer stepped in. "Mrs. Vardis, where were you 20 minutes ago? Exact location." Her gaze flickered. I was at my hotel." "Which hotel?" "The Marston." "What room? Who saw you there?" I don't know." "Don't know?" Stebbins barked. I held up a hand. "Easy, bulldog. Let the lady breathe." But it wasn't Stebbins rattling her. It was guilt. Wolfe saw it too. His voice dropped to a rumble. "Mrs. Vardis, you are lying." She shook her head rapidly. "No, I was there just before—" "Just before what?" Wolfe asked. I mean, after. Mr. Wolfe, I swear." "Silence," Wolfe said, raising a hand. "Compose yourself, and answer truthfully." Her knees buckled. She reached for a chair. "Mrs. Vardis," Wolfe said again, "if you utter one more falsehood, I shall withdraw from this case immediately and permanently." That did it. She collapsed into the chair like a collapsed shutter. "All right," she whispered. "All right. I wasn't at the hotel." Kramer stepped closer. "Then where were you?" She swallowed, trembling. I went to the storage facility where my husband kept his final portfolio. I thought the killer might go there. I thought maybe I could get to it first." Stebbins grunted. "What portfolio?" Ellen closed her eyes. "His unpublished one, the one he never showed anyone, the one that could ruin several powerful men if it ever surfaced." I whistled. "Now we're getting somewhere." Kramer rubbed his temples. "Lady, do you have any idea what kind of firestorm you're playing with?" She didn't answer. She just stared at the broken window as if expecting the shooter's shadow to reappear. Wolfe leaned back, voice low and cold. "Mrs. Vardis, you have endangered yourself, us, and the investigation. You withheld vital information." "I was scared," she whispered. "I am aware," Wolfe said. "But fear does not excuse deceit." Her lip trembled. "Please don't abandon me." Wolfe studied her, his face unreadable stone. Finally, "I shall not, provided you do not lie again." Kramer snorted softly. "You're too soft on her." "Inspector," Wolfe drawled, "you may manage your officers as you please. I shall manage my client." That shut him up for a precious 7 seconds. I stepped toward Ellen. "This portfolio, what's in it?" She shook her head. "I don't know, but my husband said it would expose corruption, hidden alliances, secret meetings. He said that if anything happened to him, the portfolio would reveal why." "And now someone wants it," I said. "Badly enough to shoot at Wolfe." "Badly enough," Kramer added, "to follow you." She buried her face in her gloves. I didn't know where else to go. Wolfe exhaled deeply, a sign the situation was now officially distasteful. "Archie. That's my name. You will escort Mrs. Vardis to the front room. She will remain in this house until further instruction." "Understood." "And Archie," Wolfe added, looking at the shattered glass again, "be watchful." There it was again, the protective note Wolfe rarely let slip. If the assassin wanted another shot, Wolfe was ensuring he'd hit me first. How sentimental. As I guided Ellen out, Kramer leaned into Wolfe. "We're stationing men outside, whether you like it or not." "I do not like it," Wolfe said calmly. "That wasn't a question." Kramer gestured to Stebbins. "Get the sniper teams updated, and find me whoever's been buying surplus steel-jacketed rounds in the last month." Stebbins nodded and left with purpose. Kramer paused at the door. "Wolfe, try not to get shot." Wolfe inclined his head. "I shall endeavour to oblige." Kramer left without storming, just tired, professional, and aware that the game had escalated. I returned just long enough to grab the broom, but Wolfe rumbled, "Archie." "Yes?" "Put that down." I did. The glass could wait, dinner couldn't, and the shooter certainly wouldn't. If there's anything I dislike more than the smell of burnt hypo, it's the smell of burnt hypo combined with the news of a fresh corpse. So naturally, Saul Panzer arrived at the brownstone at 6:17 p.m., carrying both. He stepped into the office with his usual quiet competence and announced, "Foreign's dead. Strangled. Darkroom." Wolfe, who had been evaluating a plate of Fritz's pâté with ecclesiastical solemnity, lifted his eyes. "Explain." Saul handed me a folded slip. Homicide called me because I was on their contact list for guild disputes. They want you to see it before they touch anything else. "Us," I said. "They want us." "Yes," Saul agreed mildly. The slip was a simple police memo. Charles Foreign found dead in private darkroom. Cause: strangulation via developing wire. Scene untouched pending consultation. Wolfe made a noise that might have been a sigh or the prelude to indigestion. "Archie, get your coat." That was notable. Wolfe doesn't send me into fresh murder scenes without grumbling for 3 minutes first. Tonight he skipped straight to business. That never means anything good. When we arrived at Foreign's studio, the place looked like the after-hours set of a horror film directed by a surrealist. Safe lights cast everything in a red fog that made shadows long and wrong. The air was thick with developer fumes and the metallic tang of chemicals spilled by someone no longer alive to clean them. Foreign lay crumpled on the floor, face purple, wire biting into his neck. He'd been dead long enough for rigor to start, but not long enough to lose the smugness he normally wore. Even dead, Foreign managed to look dramatic. Kramer was there, sleeves rolled up, cigar unlit but clenched to the left side of his mouth like a prisoner hoping for parole. He glanced up as we entered. "Goodwin, Panzer, and Wolfe not with you?" "Wolfe," I said, "is not leaving the brownstone unless the city collapses and democracy follows." Kramer grunted. "Shame. I'd like to ask him how he feels about this." "Probably annoyed," I said. "Possibly hungry. It's almost dinner." Saul moved closer to the body, careful not to step in the chemical puddles. I followed, doing my best not to inhale too deeply. The darkroom wasn't large, but it felt enormous in its stillness. The trays of developer and fixer glowed under the safe lights like open wounds. The enlarger stood tall, a silent witness. "Well, well," I muttered, "the glamorous life of art." Kramer shot me a look. "Don't start." "Who started? I'm continuing." We inspected the body. The wire was indeed developing wire, thin but strong, the sort used to hang drying negatives. Someone had wrapped it around Foreign's throat with enough precision to silence him quickly. "What did he do? Insult someone's exposure settings?" I asked. "Archie," Saul murmured. "Look at his pocket." I knelt and pulled out a small appointment card. 6 p.m. EV. "Oh, lovely," I said. "Ellen Vardis." Kramer's eyebrow twitched. "The widow? The one you and Wolfe are protecting?" "Yes," I said, although the word protecting is doing a lot of heavy lifting today. "She's got motive then," Kramer said. "And opportunity." Saul shook his head. "Unless she grew an extra set of hands, this wire job looks professional. Quick. Efficient." "Professional," Kramer repeated. "Or desperate." We moved to the drying rack where several negatives hung like ghostly laundry, but most of them had been burned, charred edges curling like leaves in a fire. Sabotage. Deliberate. Targeted. Saul lifted one still intact negative with tongs. Under the red light, the image was unmistakable. The same mystery man from the Polaroid, standing behind Ellen's late husband at a gala. His hat brim was torn in the same spot. It was the same man, same posture, same hunger in the eyes. The assassin had been hiding in plain sight long before his first threat. "Well," I said, "that's not ominous at all." "Careful with that," Kramer warned. "Relax," I said. "I'm not taking it home to frame." Across the room, Stebbins attempted to navigate the equipment with the delicacy of a rhinoceros browsing for fine china. "Careful," he barked at himself. "Damn dark rooms." I couldn't resist. "Stebbins, you're moving like an elephant selecting perfume," he growled. "Goodwin, stick your jokes in a tray of fixer." "Later," I said. "I'm working." Kramer turned to me. Ellen Vardis. We bring her in. Hold your horses, I said. She'll deny everything, and she might be telling the truth. She lied earlier, Kramer said. She lied out of fear, I said, not guilt. Kramer paused, weighing that. To his credit, he didn't immediately snap. After a few seconds, he said, Wolfe better have something smart to say. I grinned. He always does. Sometimes it's even helpful. We returned to the brownstone to find Wolfe in his office, hands steepled, looking like a Roman magistrate presiding over a plea from the gods. Ellen sat several feet away, pale but composed. She rose when she saw us. What happened? Wolfe's tone was granite. Sit. She sat. Mrs. Vardis, Wolfe said, Mr. Goodwin has brought news. You will listen. I summarized the scene with as little embellishment as possible, though describing Foreign's expression without sarcasm required superhuman restraint. When I pulled out the appointment card, Ellen gasped. I didn't meet him, she insisted. I never went. Kramer stepped into the room. That's not what the evidence says. She shook her head violently. I swear it. I never saw him after the guild dissolved. Your alibi? Kramer asked. I was here earlier today, then at my hotel. Then I came back here after the shooting. I crossed my arms. Not airtight, lady. Archie, Wolfe said sharply, restrain your commentary. I arched an eyebrow. Wolfe usually lets me needle suspects, but Ellen was different. Fragile, scared, or pretending to be. Wolfe addressed her. Mrs. Vardis, if you met Foreign today, you must say so now. I didn't, she cried. I told you, my husband feared Foreign, but I never saw him alone. Kramer exhaled. We could hold her. And be fools, Wolfe said. Kramer's jaw jumped. What? Foreign's death was executed by someone swift and practiced, Wolfe said. Mrs. Vardis lacks the necessary physicality, opportunity, and, most importantly, skill. You speaking from experience, I muttered. Archie, Wolfe snapped. Enough. Kramer massaged his temple. Fine. So she didn't strangle him. But she had an appointment with him. So did half of Manhattan, Wolfe said dryly. He was a portraitist. Ellen's breathing steadied slightly. Wolfe's defense, however clinical, had given her a lifeline. Kramer lowered himself onto the edge of the red chair. Wolfe, the negatives. The one of the mystery man. You think that ties him to both Vardis and Foreign? Yes, Wolfe said. You will find similar negatives were likely destroyed at the scene. Saul nodded. Burned on purpose. Wolfe continued. Our killer is eliminating visual evidence, but... He tapped the armrest. Someone arrived before him and preserved one. Who? Kramer demanded. Wolfe gave a thin smile. The same man who sent the threats. The man who circled my house. The man who photographed Mr. Vardis at a gala without his notice. A voyeur. A hunter, I added, and one hell of a narcissist. Archie, Wolfe said, prepare the notes. That startled me. Wolfe didn't often have me jump into analysis so quickly unless he was manoeuvring. I took my seat at the desk, pen ready. Wolfe was trusting me to keep up, not something he wasted on trivialities. Wolfe instructed, create a timeline, include Vardis's archives, Mrs. Vardis's discrepancies, Foreign's prior complaint, Bly's possession of the rare camera, and Miss Kerr's contradictory account. Saul leaned in. You think Kerr visited Foreign before he died? Bly claims she did, I said. And Kerr denies it, Kramer observed. One of them's lying. Kerr, Ellen whispered. She hated my husband. Hatred is abundant, Wolfe said. It is not evidence. I scribbled notes as Wolfe dictated. His voice was sharper than usual, clipped, precise. Fear, disguised as concentration. Wolfe wouldn't admit it, but someone trying to murder him had lit a fuse under him. Archie, Wolfe said. The appointment card. Fax a photostat to the Gazette. Inform Lon Cohen that the police are investigating possible guild connections. That'll stir a hornet's nest, I said. That is its purpose. Kramer let out a long breath. Wolfe, I hate saying this, but you're right. Someone's escalating. We need to move fast. Wolfe nodded once. Indeed. I finished writing, capped my pen, and said, What next? Wolfe tapped the desk. Dinner. Dinner, Kramer barked. A man was just murdered. Which I cannot prevent by ignoring Fritz, Wolfe said. Kramer stared, then sagged. "All right, Wolfe, I'll wait for your report." He didn't storm out. He just left, tired, thoughtful, and aware we'd crossed a midpoint we couldn't walk back from. I closed my notebook. "Well, boss?" Wolfe rang the bell cord. "Archie, beer." "Now you're talking," I said. It wasn't much of a ritual closure, but after a corpse in a red-lit room, a bullet through our window, and a killer who loved photographs more than sanity, it would do. If the brownstone had a pulse, it would have been beating faster by the time I got back. Something in the air felt more brittle than usual, like the walls were listening carefully in case another bullet decided to make an entrance. Wolfe was in his office, glowering at Ellen Vardis with the controlled irritation of a man who has just discovered someone has rearranged his orchid pots alphabetically. Ellen sat rigid in the red chair, fingers locked, face pale enough to be mistaken for a long exposure print. I closed the door behind me. "Back," I announced, alive even. Wolfe didn't spare me a glance. "Mrs. Vardis," he said, each syllable sculpted, "we shall now have the truth." Ellen swallowed hard. I've already—" "No," Wolfe said, raising a hand. "You have given fragments and evasions. You will now provide the whole." Her shoulders slumped like a marionette with cut strings. "All right," she whispered. "I suppose it was inevitable." I took a seat at my desk, partly because I wanted notes, partly because if Wolfe decided to explode, the desk made for decent cover. Ellen's voice came halting at first, then faster, like truth finally untangled itself. The final portfolio. My husband wasn't blackmailing anyone. He was trying to expose them. He photographed powerful men, powerful people, doing things that could destroy their careers, illegal gatherings, secret deals, corruption, even one police official. "So he was a civic-minded citizen with a death wish," I said. She winced. "He believed people deserved to know the truth." "And you disagreed," Wolfe said bluntly. "I knew it would kill him," she whispered. "He said the camera reveals what people try to hide. He didn't understand how far some men would go to bury the truth." "So," I said, "you hid the portfolio." Her eyes lifted, moist. "Yes. The night before he died, he begged me not to destroy it, but he said if the guild, or anyone connected to them, came after me, I was to hide it where even he wouldn't look." "Which was where?" Wolfe asked. "A storage facility downtown, in a hollow enlarger base. My husband collected antique enlargers, so no one would question it." "And how do you know no one questioned it?" I asked. She swallowed again. "Because when I went there 2 days after he died, everything was untouched." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "And today?" Her voice cracked. "Today it wasn't." Well, that got my attention. "Meaning?" "Someone broke in. They knew exactly where to look. The hollow base was smashed open. The negatives were gone." A tidy silence fell over the room. Wolfe leaned back, belly settling like a judge in deliberation. "Mrs. Vardis, you understand that by withholding this, you risked our lives as well as your own." "Yes," she whispered. "I was afraid. I thought, if I didn't mention the portfolio, maybe the danger would pass." "Danger," Wolfe said coldly, "does not pass. It compounds." "Boss," I said, "the storage unit, Saul and I can check it." "You will," Wolfe replied, "now." Before he could lecture further, Theodore Horstman leaned into the room, looking irritated that the real world had intruded on orchid hours. Wolfe dismissed him with a flick of fingers. Ellen rose. "Mr. Wolfe, I truly am sorry." "I am not your confessor," Wolfe said. "But your remorse is noted. Remain here until we return." "We?" I asked. Wolfe turned his gaze to me. "Archie, I am sending Saul with you. You will not attend alone." "Nice to know you care," I said. "Phooey," Wolfe muttered, but he didn't deny it. Saul and I made the trip to the storage facility, a cement mausoleum pretending to be a warehouse for nostalgia and broken dreams. The clerk on duty was half asleep and barely looked up when we walked in. The enlarger base wasn't hard to find. The hollow compartment had been pried apart like a clamshell. Inside was nothing but splintered wood, dust, and the faint scent of old chemicals. "Well," I said, "at least the thief left enough clues to identify his shoe size." Saul crouched over the wreckage. They knew what they were doing. Strong hands, clean tools, someone who's broken into things before. "That narrows it down to half of Manhattan," I said, kicking a stray screw. If crooks took up knitting instead, I'd spend my nights worrying about yarn shortages instead of bullets. Saul didn't smile. Someone beat us by hours, maybe minutes. Lovely. I stared around. Anything else? He pointed to fresh scratches on the metal bracket, forced open with a crowbar. Efficient, no hesitation. Just what I needed, I sighed. A crook who respects punctuality. Saul stood. We should go. Wolfe won't like being kept waiting. Wolfe doesn't like being awake after 9, I said. This won't improve his mood. Back at the brownstone, Kramer was waiting, posture stiff, expression carved from granite. The moment he saw us, he barked. Well? The negatives are gone, I said. Someone cleaned out the place before we got there. Kramer chewed his cigar like it owed him rent. You sure? Yes, I answered, unless the negatives decided to grow legs. What about the widow, he demanded. She hiding anything else? Yes, Wolfe said from behind his desk, but nothing she will admit until pressed. Kramer stepped forward. Wolfe, enough games. What theory are you sitting on? If I had a complete theory, Wolfe said calmly, I would share it. At present, I have fragments. Kramer's cheeks darkened. Then share the fragments. Wolfe considered him. Very well. The killer does not care about the reputations of the men in the photographs. He cares about one photograph. Which one? Kramer demanded. The one missing, Wolfe said. I blinked. You mean he stole the whole portfolio just to hide one picture? Yes. Kramer rubbed his forehead. Which one? I don't know yet, Wolfe said. But he does. Kramer paced. If you know something, anything, tell me. But Wolfe wouldn't. Not yet. Before Kramer could escalate into threats of subpoenas, the doorbell rang. Fritz appeared with an envelope. For you, Mr. Wolfe. Wolfe opened it. His nostrils flared. I stepped beside him. Another Polaroid? Indeed, Wolfe said. This one was worse. The mystery man stood outside the brownstone again, but this time he was aiming a pistol directly at the camera, directly at Wolfe. Below it, tonight. Well, I said, I guess he's tired of subtlety. Subtlety, Wolfe murmured, has fled this case. Kramer seized the photo. He's escalating. Yes, Wolfe said, and quickly. Ellen gasped from across the room. He's coming. For who? I asked. Wolfe didn't answer. Kramer cleared his throat. Wolfe, you need protection. I need dinner, Wolfe replied. Tomorrow you'll need a coffin, Kramer shot back. Wolfe raised one eyebrow. Inspector, your melodrama is unbecoming. But Kramer didn't bark. He didn't pace. He lowered his voice. Wolfe, be careful. It wasn't an order. It was respect. Gruff, unwilling respect. Wolfe inclined his head, a small gesture, but for him it might as well have been a handshake. I turned toward Wolfe. You want me out again tonight? No, Wolfe said sharply. You will not leave this house after dark. Sure, I said. Of course. I turned away before he saw the grin. He knew I was lying. Archie, Wolfe said behind me. Yes? Bah. That was Wolfe for, be careful. It was almost touching. Almost. The night air had the chill of a reprimand as Saul and I stepped onto the rooftop overlooking Wolfe's office window. I've never been fond of heights, not because I fear falling, but because rooftops tend to attract people who want to shoot me. Still, if Wolfe wanted me to hunt for the sniper who'd taken aim at his head, rooftops were the place to start. My suit, freshly pressed that morning, was already picking up rooftop grime, and I considered sending the assassin a bill for dry cleaning once we had his name and a suitable address. Saul crouched beside a low parapet and pointed to a cluster of cigarette stubs arranged like an abandoned art installation. Lucky strikes, he murmured, smoked halfway down. Which tells us our shooter is nervous, impatient, or cheap, I said, or all three. Saul lifted a lens cloth with gloved fingers. And tidy. He kept his equipment clean. I scanned the line of sight. The angle was perfect, a straight shot into Wolfe's office window, right where the old man liked to anchor himself like a well-fed Buddha. Well, I said, at least the guy has good taste in angles. Shame about the aim. Saul ignored my commentary. He studied the scuffed tar paper. He was here recently, maybe last night. And maybe he'll come back, I said. I'd roll out a welcome mat, but Wolfe forbids rugs on rooftops. Saul glanced at me. Archie, look. Something yellow peeked from under a brick. I tugged it free, a matchbook, slick from dew. The Silver Lantern, Manhattan's classiest den of overpriced martinis and underpriced morals. Its clientele included actors, socialites, and the photographers who pretended not to enjoy taking candid shots of both. Nice, I said. The assassin has good taste in nightclubs too. Could be nothing, Saul said. Everything's nothing until it's something. We continued down the fire escape and threaded through the alley below. Shadows clung to the walls like gossip, and I tried to blend into them, difficult when wearing a tie that Fritz had pressed until it shone like a diplomatic badge. The alley smelled faintly of fixer from a nearby studio, reminding me that in this case, you couldn't walk 5 blocks without stepping on some photographer's turf. Saul, I said, doesn't it bother you how often this creep finds the perfect vista to line up Wolfe's head in his crosshairs? He's practiced, Saul replied. Practiced at shooting or practiced at stalking Wolfe? Both, probably. Comforting. When we reached the next rooftop, Saul stopped dead. Here too. More cigarettes, more scuff marks, more evidence that whoever wanted Wolfe dead enjoyed the view from a variety of rooftops. But this time Saul frowned harder than usual. Something's off, he muttered. I scanned the area. Off how? These positions, they're familiar. Well, yes, I said, because they all overlook Wolfe's window. No, Saul said, familiar in another way. Before I could pry further, a flashlight beam cut through the shadows. I froze. A second later, Kramer's unmistakable silhouette appeared, cigar jutting like a punctuation mark at the end of a long, irritated sentence. Goodwin, he growled. Panzer, I suppose I should have guessed. Swell to see you too, Inspector, I said. You missed the rooftop cocktail hour, but I can still offer you a lucky strike butt if you want one. Kramer ignored that. We followed the prints from the alley. Thought we might find the shooter camping out. Instead, I find you two skylarking. Inspector, Saul said gently, we found something important. I showed him the matchbook. He grunted. Silver Lantern. Figures. You know the place? I asked. Kramer gave me a look. Son, I know every place where criminals go to feel glamorous. Now tell me what else you got. Saul pointed to the vantage point. The shooter was here. Same angle, same staging, and on the building 3 blocks back. Kramer's brows knitted. Why the hell would he need multiple perches? I opened my mouth to offer a snappy remark, but Saul beat me to it. Because these locations match the backgrounds of several photographs taken by Ellen Vardis's husband. That one hit me harder than the December wind. You're sure? Saul nodded. Positive. Kramer turned to me. What is he talking about? Ellen's husband, I explained, took a series of candid shots around Manhattan, some published, some not. Saul's suggesting the sniper is choosing his positions based on those photos. Kramer considered it. Why? Either nostalgia, I said, or he's playing a game. Kramer spat the cigar onto the ground. Never a good sign. You two better be wrong. We rarely are, I said. Unfortunately. A moment later, a uniform climbed up the fire escape with a file in hand. Inspector, military intelligence just responded. Confidential packet. Kramer tore it open and scanned it. His face contorted, not with anger but confusion. He looked at me. Wolfe was right. I almost dropped my jaw. Run that by me again? Kramer cleared his throat like it pained him. Wolfe was right. The man in the Polaroid might be Jasper Rain. The vanished war photographer? I asked. Presumed dead, Kramer said. Went missing during a classified operation overseas. No body recovered. Saul folded his arms. So, he's alive. Or someone wants us to think so, Kramer muttered. False leads we'd waded through before, but this one had claws. Half the photography world worshipped Rain. The other half wanted him to stay 6 feet under, so they could pretend they hadn't stolen his techniques. Kramer exhaled smoke that wasn't even there. We saw a picture of Rain's old squad. This man resembles him, but the timeline's wrong. He disappeared before Vardis took that gala photo. So not Rain, I said. Just a lookalike with worse table manners. Goodwin, Kramer muttered. If you don't take this seriously... I am, I said. Seriousness is the one thing Wolfe's been breathing down my neck about since breakfast. Saul tilted his head. Men reinvent themselves. Photographers especially. War photographers most of all, Kramer added. They come back with new names, new lives, sometimes new enemies. I look back at the vantage point. So our guy could be Rain, or someone pretending to be Rain, or someone inspired by Rain, or someone using Rain as a smokescreen, Saul said. Too many possibilities for one rooftop. When we returned to the brownstone, Wolfe was in the middle of a minor lecture about the stupidity of placing one's corporeal form between bullets and their intended target. "You are not a shield, Archie," Wolfe said. "You are an investigator. You will cease gallivanting across rooftops where assassins may roost." "If you want to face the assassin personally," I said, "I'd be happy to give up the rooftops." He glared. "Bah!" That was Wolfe for, "I'd rather die than set foot on a roof." Kramer joined Wolfe near the desk. "Wolfe, you were right about Rain." Wolfe didn't gloat. He simply allowed the acknowledgement to settle in the room like a fresh orchid bloom. Kramer continued, "But it still doesn't fit. Rain disappeared during a Black Book operation. There's no official record of him returning." "That," Wolfe said, "is precisely why he can return unnoticed." Kramer rubbed his jaw. "I hate when you do that. Say something that sounds like nonsense but still makes sense." Wolfe grunted. "Then do not request my thoughts." Kramer huffed. "I didn't request them. I demanded them." "Semantics," Wolfe said. From across the room, Ellen watched silently, her hands twisted in her lap. Her face paled further when Saul explained our rooftop findings. "He's following the photographs," she whispered. "My husband's photographs." Wolfe nodded. "Symbolic, perhaps, or strategic?" Archie's wit required an outlet. If the killer wants Wolfe dead, he should take a number and wait in line with everyone Wolfe has insulted this year. Wolfe scowled. "Archie, silence." "Just helping keep morale up." Kramer shook his head. "God help us." Saul laid a set of printed photos on Wolfe's desk, blown up enlargements of the vantage points. "Look here," he said. "Each rooftop, each alley, the same places where Mr. Vardis once stood while photographing subjects during major events." "They're recreating his movements," I said. "No," Saul corrected. "They're retracing them, as if searching for something he saw." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Something in one of his photographs." Kramer snapped his fingers. "A person, a gesture, a detail." "Not a detail," Wolfe corrected. "A threat." The room went quiet. Saul touched the Polaroid on Wolfe's desk, the one showing the gunman aiming at the brownstone. "He's escalating." "Yes," Wolfe said softly. "And his next step will be bolder." Kramer checked his watch. "I'm stationing men outside. This time Wolfe doesn't get to argue." Wolfe waved him off. "Do as you wish." I leaned on my desk. "Boss, what's the play?" Wolfe closed his eyes for a moment, thinking, calculating. Then, "We wait." "Wait," I said. "Boss, the guy has a gun and an artistic temperament." "And we," Wolfe said, "have information he wants. He will come." "And we're ready?" I asked. "No," Wolfe said, "but we shall be." Fritz appeared in the doorway with a tray. Dinner. A welcome intrusion. Kramer sighed. "Wolfe, I'll wait for your next report." "And I," Wolfe said, "for my dinner." As Kramer left, Saul turned to us. "We're close." "Too close," I said. "If this guy's retracing old photographs, he's got a plan." Wolfe opened his eyes. "Precisely." Saul nodded, then slipped out silently. I took my place at the desk. Wolfe lifted his fork, and the night around us tightened like a shutter preparing to snap. The morning sunlight slanted across Wolfe's office like it was trying to interrogate the dust. I came in carrying 3 newspapers, a stack of Saul's notes, and the grim realization that sleep had become something other people enjoyed. Wolfe was already in his chair, taking his orchid's morning absence as an opportunity to brood. When Wolfe broods, the brownstone feels like it's wearing a thundercloud for a hat. He didn't greet me. He simply said, "Archie, sit." That was my first clue the day would be unpleasant. Ellen Vardis sat in the red chair, hands folded tightly, as if afraid they might betray her. Saul was perched on the edge of the couch, studying enlargements like a surgeon preparing for an operation. The room felt full of fear, full of clues, full of tension none of us could name yet. Wolfe inhaled, then, "We shall resolve the central question." "Only one?" I said. "I've got at least 6. He ignored me. "Mrs. Vardis," he continued, Your husband's photographs, particularly the final portfolio, contained more than scandalous indiscretions. Ellen stiffened. Yes. What you concealed, Wolfe said calmly, was not the identities of misbehaving socialites, but the identity of a spy. The word hit the room like a dropped lens. Saul looked up. I stopped pretending to organize the notes. Ellen's breath caught in her throat. Wolfe went on. Among your husband's wartime photographs was one capturing an illicit meeting between an American officer and an enemy agent. The offense was treason. The consequence, if discovered, would have been death. Ellen whispered, I never wanted it known. My husband said the camera could destroy evil men as easily as it revealed them. But this man, this officer, he has power, influence, protection. Still? I asked. Yes. Saul exhaled low. Then the killer isn't hiding corruption from the public. He's hiding treason from history. Wolfe nodded once. Precisely. Mrs. Vardis has been shielding the identity of this officer, believing exposure would bring chaos to the government. Ellen shook. He would kill me. Kill all of you. Anyone who knows the truth. Phooey, Wolfe murmured, though his eyes had hardened. Murderers kill for reasons. Once we understand the reason, we reduce the danger. Boss, I said, understanding won't stop bullets. No, Wolfe said, but knowledge gives us the advantage. I wasn't convinced, but Wolfe rarely needed my agreement. Saul set down the enlargements. The Polaroid man, the one stalking the brownstone, isn't Jasper Rain. No, Wolfe said. He is the officer in that treasonous photograph. Now older, now desperate. And dangerous, I said. Indeed. Before Wolfe could elaborate, the bell rang, one of those sharp, urgent rings that announced Kramer rather than a client or a salesman. Fritz opened the door and in walked Inspector Kramer himself, carrying the expression of a man who'd been handed a confession wrapped in dynamite. He didn't waste time. Wolfe, we got confirmation. Wolfe inclined his head. From whom? The War Department, Kramer said. Unofficially. Very unofficially. They'll deny it if I say their name out loud. Then do not, Wolfe said sharply. Kramer nodded. They admit one officer, one decorated, respected officer, might have had ties to enemy agents during the war. A whisper, nothing more, but enough to scare them, enough to send someone into a panic if a photograph ever surfaced. Ellen buried her face in her hands. Kramer looked at her, then back at Wolfe. They won't tell me the name. They'd rather let the man keep walking free than let the country take a hit. But someone high up knows. Someone high up is scared. Wolfe steepled his fingers. And the killer? Could be the officer, Kramer said. Could be someone covering for him. Could be someone ordered to clean up loose ends. Loose ends meaning Mrs. Vardis, I said. And Wolfe, Saul added quietly. Kramer met Wolfe's eyes. I'm not saying I trust you, but I trust your brain, and I need it working before another body drops. Wolfe's tone was cool. Then refrain from insulting me, and we may accomplish something. Kramer huffed. Fine. We work together. Temporarily. It was as close to an alliance as they'd had in months. Wolfe turned to me. Archie, my cards. I fetched the drawer of index cards, Wolfe's sacred filing system of clues, suspects, motives, and schedules. On a whim, I slid one card into the wrong category. Photographers under politicians. A harmless prank designed to test whether Wolfe's brain could detect microscopic chaos. He took the drawer from me, glanced once, and said, Put the Kerr card back where it belongs. I blinked. How? He did not answer. He simply looked at me with such unusual gentleness that I nearly sat down on the floor. Archie, he said softly, the world is precarious enough without unnecessary disarray. The old man actually worried about me. That was disconcerting. Kramer cleared his throat. Enough sentiment. Wolfe, what's your theory? I have no theory, Wolfe said. I have a structure. Fine, build it. Wolfe spoke slowly, each word heavy as stone. The murderer believes one photograph threatens his life. He has searched for the original negative. He has searched for copies. He has searched for those who might have seen it. He is escalating because he has not found what he wants. Which is? Kramer asked. The missing negative, Wolfe said. The one photograph that proves treason. Ellen shivered. But how did he know Vardis took it? How did he find me? War breeds connections, Saul murmured. Someone talked, someone remembered, someone looked for patterns. Wolfe pointed to the rooftop photos. Our assassin retraces Vardis's steps because he once followed them with hostile purpose. He is returning to old grounds, to the places he expects evidence to be hidden. Kramer rubbed his chin. Then we're close. Too close, Wolfe said. As if on cue, the doorbell rang again. Fritz entered with an envelope. No return address, no stamp, hand-delivered by someone who apparently didn't mind risking a bullet from the officers stationed outside. For you, Mr. Wolfe. Wolfe opened it. For a moment, his face did not move. Then he handed it to me. I looked. Inside was a single negative sleeve. Empty, except for a cropped print. The photograph was one of the gala shots from Vardis's portfolio, but the officer's face had been removed, cut out cleanly with a razor. Only the enemy agent remained, hand reaching toward a headless blur where the officer once stood. A note was scribbled across the bottom. You're looking in the wrong direction. Saul inhaled sharply. Ellen swayed in her chair. Kramer snapped. He's taunting us. No, Wolfe said. He is warning us. The photograph we seek does not reveal his identity. Then what does it reveal? I asked. Wolfe closed his eyes briefly. His accomplice. The room went still, very still. Kramer sat slowly. So, there were two traitors. Yes, Wolfe said. And while the officer hunts us, the accomplice hunts him. That makes the situation infinitely more dangerous. Why send us the cropped print? I asked. Vanity, Wolfe said. Demonstration, or perhaps despair. A desperate man will confuse threats with communication. Kramer rubbed his forehead. Wolfe, you need police protection. Full detail. No, Wolfe said. Yes, Kramer growled, or I'll put a guard inside your office whether you like it or not. Wolfe stiffened. You will not. Try me. I stepped between them. Gentlemen, if you're going to fight, at least let me put down a rug. Blood's murder to scrub out of hardwood. Kramer pinched the bridge of his nose. Wolfe, we are in danger, all of us. For once, Wolfe murmured. You are correct. I glanced toward the window. Boss, maybe we should fortify the place. No, Wolfe said. We fortify with information, not lumber. Kramer stood. All right, Wolfe. I'll wait for your next report. And send men, quietly. Wolfe didn't argue. That alone scared me. After Kramer left, Ellen stood shakily. Mr. Wolfe, will anyone survive this? Wolfe answered with silence, a silence so deliberate it was worse than words. She sat again. I gathered papers. Wolfe watched me, expression unreadable. Then, quietly, almost too quietly, Archie. Yeah? Do not open the front door alone anymore. It hit harder than a bullet through glass. For once I didn't joke. All right. He exhaled, relief disguised as impatience. I returned the cropped photograph to its sleeve. The faint image stared back, silent, incomplete. The killer's message was clear, and whatever came next would not be subtle. The first hint that Wolfe had decided to go to war came later that day when he summoned me and announced, Archie, we shall manipulate public opinion. When Wolfe voluntarily interacts with the outside world before Fritz has fed him, you know calamity is imminent. I sat on the arm of the red chair, nursing a cup of coffee strong enough to dissolve a horseshoe. Manipulate how? Release a manifesto? Start a radio program? Form an orchestra? He scowled. Do not be absurd. We shall speak to Mr. Cohen. That meant Lon Cohen, editor at the Gazette and patron saint of Manhattan's gossip mill. If Wolfe was involving the press, the situation had officially graduated from dangerous to suicidal. Within the hour, Saul had arranged a discreet ride to the Gazette, where the newsroom buzzed like a caffeinated beehive. Smoke hung thick as velvet as reporters hammered typewriters with the mania of men racing time. I'd always liked the place. Chaos was its native language, and I speak it fluently. Goodwin, Lon Cohen shouted from across the room. I hope you brought something explosive. Explosive, I said, is one word for it. Catastrophic is another. He ushered me into his cramped glass-walled office, where privacy was purely theoretical. So, what's the old genius planning? Wolfe wants the Gazette to run a story declaring the missing negative restored, not found, restored, and that he intends to name the traitor in a public statement. Cohen nearly swallowed his cigar. Is he insane? That's always been open for debate. Cohen leaned back, overwhelmed by the possibilities. You realize this puts a target the size of Times Square on Wolfe's back. Already there, I said, but Wolfe thinks the killer will panic if he believes the evidence is intact. Cohen's grin sharpened. The press loves panic. Then, as he grabbed a notepad, fine, we'll run it. Front page. Which is how, 4 hours later, I found myself reading the Gazette headline. Nero Wolfe to expose secret wartime traitor. Exclusive. Underneath, an illustration of Wolfe scowling at some imaginary villain made him look like a disgruntled emperor. The public reacted exactly how you'd expect. Half declared Wolfe a hero, half declared him a publicity hound, and a small but vocal faction insisted it was all a hoax to sell orchids. New York never misses an opportunity to argue. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe absorbed the uproar with the serenity of a man observing ants quarrel. They will come, he said simply. Who specifically? I asked. The killer, his accomplice, half the War Department? All of them, Wolfe said, but only one with lethal intent. Kramer arrived moments later, radiating the kind of stress usually reserved for hostage negotiators and rookie patrolmen. He tossed the Gazette on Wolfe's desk. Couldn't give me a heads up, could you? Wolfe lifted an eyebrow. Inspector, you have officers stationed outside my home, within my home, and likely in the shrubbery. Your preparation seems adequate. It's not preparation I'm worried about, Kramer growled. It's fallout. If this article hits the wrong people, we'll have federal agents up to our eyebrows. Phooey, Wolfe said, but without conviction. Kramer pinched the bridge of his nose. Fine, I'll work with you. But if you get shot, I'm filling out the paperwork in crayon, so Internal Affairs thinks you died in a pie-eating contest. That is grotesque, Wolfe replied. Paperwork is grotesque, Stebbins added from near the bookshelf, especially when Wolfe's involved. That, from Pearlie Stebbins, counted as affection. We set to work. Saul spread his rooftop maps across my desk, tracing routes like a general preparing a siege. He'll come in disguise, Saul said. Delivery staff, couriers, anyone with a uniform that lets him walk up to the door. Great, I said. We'll have to frisk the milkman. You don't drink milk, Saul reminded me. Rarely, I said. But Wolfe thinks it builds character. Wolfe ignored the remark. Archie. Yes, sir. You will stay by my side today. Is that a request or an order? An inevitability, he replied dryly. I grinned. I always enjoy the view. He snorted, dangerously close to a phooey. To pass the time, I reorganized Wolfe's index cards. Not honestly. I merely shifted one card a half-inch off grid. Wolfe stared at it with such despair you'd think I'd shaved one of his orchids. Archie, he murmured, restore the card. I did. The tenderness in his voice tossed my balance for a moment. At 3:10 p.m. the first decoy arrived, a florist delivering 12 white roses to Mr. Wolfe. I sent him away before he could murder the spelling again. At 4:02, a courier attempted to deliver a package marked confidential. Saul intercepted it, a real delivery, wrong address. But at 5:15 p.m. the doorbell rang again. I approached the door with a mop handle raised like a vaudeville spear. Wolfe sighed loudly enough to rattle glass. Archie, cease this buffoonery. Boss, if an assassin shows up, I'd like to greet him with style. You will greet him with competence, Wolfe snapped. I put down the mop handle, rearranging my features into something approximating professionalism. Fritz appeared in the office doorway. A package for Mr. Wolfe. Wolfe held out his hand without rising. Fritz delivered a small, brown-wrapped parcel the size of a cigar box. No return address, no postage. That meant direct delivery, which meant danger. Wolfe passed the parcel to me. Open. Me? I asked. Your reflexes are faster, not fast enough to dodge an explosion. Archie, Wolfe warned. I opened the parcel carefully. Inside was a bullet, a single steel-jacketed round, identical to the one that shattered Wolfe's window. Under it lay a note. Tonight. Well, I said, at least he's punctual. Kramer snatched the note. That's it. I'm placing this building under full police guard. No, Wolfe said. Yes, Kramer barked. Before this turns into a funeral home. Wolfe adjusted himself in his chair. "Inspector, the killer will act only when he believes the house unguarded. Flooding it with officers will delay him, not deter him." "Delay is good," Kramer argued. "Delay," Wolfe countered, "gives him time to plan a more catastrophic attack." Kramer cursed under his breath. "All right, limited guard. 1 man at the corner, 1 man across the street. No one at the door unless summoned." "That," Wolfe said, "is tolerable." Stebbins muttered, "If Wolfe gets killed tonight, I'm not writing the report. I'll make Goodwin do it." "That's affection, Pearlie," I told him. "Don't scare yourself." Saul approached Wolfe's desk. "He'll come soon. The rooftops are empty. He's abandoning vantage points." "Yes," Wolfe murmured. "He intends to come inside." A silence swallowed the room. Even Fritz remained in the doorway longer than usual, silently watching Wolfe as if memorizing him for posterity. "Archie," Wolfe said at last. "Yes, sir." "You will remain near me until this is concluded. No exceptions." I blinked. Wolfe had issued commands before, but never one aimed so directly at my safety. "Understood," I said quietly. He nodded, satisfied. The windows darkened. Manhattan's hum took on its evening timbre. Cars whispering past, horns bleating irritably, the dim roar of a city preparing for trouble. Inside the office, the tension threaded itself into the walls, turning the brownstone into a battlefield disguised as a home. At 7:42 p.m., Fritz entered with dinner, perfectly on schedule. "Roast duck," he announced. "Excellent," Wolfe replied, as though assassination schedules were a minor nuisance compared to an overcooked entree. Kramer hovered by the door. "You eat now?" Wolfe glared. "Inspector, murderers do not dictate my meals." "You're impossible," Kramer muttered. "Correct," Wolfe said. Dinner proceeded in silence. Wolfe ate deliberately, savouring every bite, as if the fate of the free world depended on the exact ratio of duck to sauce. Ellen barely touched her plate. Saul ate quickly, eyes drifting to the windows. I pretended calm and failed. At 8:03, Wolfe dabbed his lips. "Archie, secure the office, bolt the door." I did. The click echoed louder than usual. Wolfe looked around the room, then at me. "He will come soon." "How sure are you?" I asked. "Entirely." Kramer checked his watch. "If he's coming, it'll be tonight." We all knew it. The killer had said as much. But knowing didn't make waiting easier. The brownstone held its breath. Wolfe sank back into his chair, closed his eyes, and folded his hands. "Let him come," he said. We were ready. All that remained was to face whoever came to the door. The hour before a showdown in Nero Wolfe's office has a particular flavour, like the air just before a thunderstorm, if thunderstorms also shuffled their feet on the Persian rug and smelled faintly of photographic chemicals. By 7 o'clock, the brownstone had settled into that thick, waiting hush I knew too well. You don't work for Wolfe as long as I have without learning the sound of the world tightening its belt. And that night, the belt was cinched all the way to the last hole. Wolfe had sent the summons early that afternoon, dictating them in a tone suggesting he was calling errant schoolchildren to account rather than potential murderers. I typed them without comment, though I'll admit I added a flourish to the carbon copies for posterity. If I was going to risk my charming jawline in a room full of suspects, I wanted some record of the official charges: stupidity, deceit, treachery, attempted homicide, and messy bookkeeping. By the time the bell rang, precisely 7:46 p.m., Wolfe was already in his chair, planted like a mountain contemplating erosion. He had chosen his favourite yellow silk cravat, a detail that suggested he expected this evening to require dignity. I took my usual spot at my desk, index cards in order, pencil sharpened, pistol within easy reach. Fritz lingered just outside the office door, pretending to polish the silver tray he'd bring the dinner plates on later, but truly he was listening like a man preparing to rush in with smelling salts. Our guests arrived in a procession that could have been a parade if the theme had been public nervous breakdowns of Manhattan. First to enter was Ellen Vardis, pale as the morning after Thanksgiving, fingers knotted in her gloves. She hovered near the hat rack like it could shield her from artillery. Lillian Kerr followed, a walking advertisement for the avant-garde, dramatic lipstick, angular haircut, and clothing arranged to suggest she had invented fashion and found it insufficient. Maurice Bligh came last, shoulders slumped, smelling of cigarette ash and anxiety, the kind of man who could sell you a camera while convincing you it was probably haunted. Behind them slipped Inspector Kramer and Sergeant Stebbins. Kramer had the hard-set jaw of a man who'd been denied his dinner by professional duty. Stebbins surveyed the room like he expected someone to attack him with a telephoto lens. Wolfe waited until everyone was seated before lifting a finger, the equivalent of a starting pistol in his courtroom routines. "Good evening," he said, which was generous given the circumstances. "We are here to dispose of a matter that has grown intolerably irksome." Stebbins muttered, "That your word for murder?" Wolfe didn't bother glancing at him. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, "you may close the door." I did. After all, it's tradition to seal the tomb before the confessions begin. Wolfe leaned back, hands templed over his stomach. "You each have, in various ways, contributed to this miasma. Lies, deflections, and misapprehensions have wasted my time. That ends now." Lillian scoffed. "I didn't kill anyone. You can't intimidate me with that tone of God act." Wolfe opened his eyes only slightly. "Madam, if I wished to intimidate you, you would already be intimidated." Kramer's lips twitched, either amusement or acid reflux. I'm not qualified to diagnose. Wolfe continued. "The question before us is simple. Who murdered Mr. Vardis, Mr. Foran, and attempted the life of Mr. Goodwin and myself, and why?" I appreciated the acknowledgement, though Wolfe's phrasing made my injuries sound like a mild inconvenience, perhaps akin to misplacing a dictionary. He pointed one thick finger at Ellen. "Mrs. Vardis, your husband's final portfolio contained proof of a treasonous liaison. That alone could motivate murder. But the photographs were taken years ago and hidden by you. The killer wanted them silenced, permanently." Ellen trembled. I couldn't let his work destroy people." Wolfe's brows lifted. "People? Or one man?" Bligh shifted in his seat. "Now wait just a—" "Silence!" Wolfe thundered, and Bligh shut his mouth so fast he nearly swallowed a syllable. I knew Wolfe had reached the pivot point, the moment everything narrows to a single conclusion, even if the audience is still chasing red herrings. He said, "Mrs. Vardis, your husband photographed a man he believed to be an American officer meeting secretly with an enemy agent. That officer still lives. He holds influence, and he has killed to protect his secret." Lillian frowned. "And who is this supposed officer?" Kramer looked at Wolfe. "Yes, I'd like to hear that too." Wolfe inhaled deeply, as if bracing his lungs for the weight of the revelation. "The man in the Polaroids, the man who aimed a pistol through my office window, the man who broke into the storage facility for the portfolio." He paused, letting the room hold its breath. "And the man who sits in this room now." For half a second the world stood still, then all eyes turned to Maurice Bligh. He tried to laugh. "Me? I'm a supplier, not a soldier. You've lost your mind, or your eyesight." Wolfe shook his head. "Your shop contained the rare glass plate camera visible in the background of the Polaroid clue. The military-grade film Ellen purchased was obtained through you. The burned negatives in Foran's darkroom included your own silhouette, carelessly left in the corner of a print. You have stalked the locations associated with Mr. Vardis's photographs, and you murdered him when you learned he planned to publish." Bligh's hands were trembling now, the mask slipping. You can't prove—" Kramer stood, pulling back his coat. "I can. Military intelligence confirmed you served under an alias during the war. You vanished after a classified operation went bad. You're the officer in the photos." Bligh panicked. "Those pictures—" He didn't know what he saw. Wolfe cut him off sharply. "He saw treason. The camera does not lie, Mr. Bligh. You do." Then it happened in the way violence always happens. Too fast for thought, too slow for comfort. Bligh lunged from the chair, producing a small pistol from his coat. His hand shook, but the barrel aimed directly at Wolfe. I didn't think. I moved. A good employee doesn't let his employer be perforated like a postcard. But before I reached Bligh, before my hand connected with his wrist, before any heroic pose could be struck for posterity, Kramer fired. One clean shot. Bligh staggered, pistol clattering to the floor, and collapsed to his knees, clutching his shoulder. Stebbins rushed in with cuffs, muttering, "Damn fool," as he secured Bligh. Kramer lowered his gun, exhaled, and gave Wolfe a sidelong look. "Don't say I never did anything for you." Wolfe inclined his head solemnly. "Inspector, Words fail me. That was as emotional as Wolfe gets. For all I know, he was weeping on the inside. Ellen was sobbing now, face in her gloves. Lillian's bravado had drained like bad fixer solution. Even Stebbins looked spooked. Wolfe took command once more, voice steady as architecture. Sergeant Stebbins, ensure Mr. Bligh receives medical attention and is transported to custody. Inspector, you and the War Department may confer on the appropriate charges. Treason, murder, attempted murder. Select at your convenience. Kramer pocketed his gun. We'll handle it, but I want the negatives. Yes, Wolfe said dryly, I imagine you do. Ellen lifted her head. You'll give them, won't you? Wolfe's eyes flicked toward her. In due course. They are evidence, and, he allowed a rare twitch of humour, I am not a charity worker. I knew then he'd demand proper compensation from the War Department. Justice may be priceless, but Wolfe never works on credit. The room slowly decompressed. Officers escorted Bligh out. Lillian fled with a muttered apology to no one specific. Ellen stayed seated, trembling like a leaf debating whether to detach. Kramer paused at the door. Wolfe, he said grudgingly, you were right about all of it. Wolfe lifted a brow. Unexpected, Inspector, thank you. Kramer allowed himself half a smile. Don't get used to it. Then he left. Silence settled. Fritz appeared in the doorway, eyes wide. Dinner is ready, he whispered, as if afraid he'd missed the overture. Wolfe closed his eyes briefly. Bring it, Fritz. Then softer. Please. When Fritz departed, Wolfe focused on me. Archie. Yeah? You are an unmitigated fool. His voice quavered. Just a touch, but enough to register on my Archie Goodwin emotional Richter scale. You leapt into a line of fire. Well, I said, someone had to rescue your charming hide. He glared. Bah! It was the gentlest bah I'd heard in years. If he ever wrote a sonnet, that would be the first line. Dinner arrived then, a magnificent roast fragrant enough to calm a riot. Wolfe carved with ceremony, offering Ellen the first plate. She murmured gratitude, though her hands still shook. Wolfe raised his glass. To the intolerable burden of truth, he declared. May it stay someone else's burden for a while, I added. Ellen managed a watery smile. Wolfe snorted, another tender fouet waiting in the wings. As we ate, I felt the adrenaline finally ebb. Bligh was caught. The photographs were safe. Wolfe was alive. And me? I planned on sleeping with one eye open just in case the next killer had better aim.